Hello guys, welcome to Redditor's Revenge. Here we post amazing revenge stories daily. And if you want more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel and stay tuned with us. Moving on to our today's first story. The family has always been everything to me. I grew up in a home of four where there was much love. My father owns about 3 companies that deal in agriculture. He was an easygoing man who had a soft spot for people that were in need, and so besides the charitable works he did, he employed so many laborers than he needed on his farms and factories just as a means of getting idle people off the street. Though I am not against helping people as I equally love doing so, I believe wisdom should be applied, and that was something my mom began doing when she came into my father's life. While my father was free-handed and generous, my mom was frugal and somewhat right-fisted. They both formed a great combination. I had a fraternal twin, Brittany, who was different from me in many ways. Brittany was the rebellious and strong-headed one of the family. What she determined to do was exactly what she did, as people's opinions never really mattered to her. While I was known for being quiet and reserved, Brittany was loud and attracted attention to herself. She knew how to light up the spark in a room full of mourners, and people so loved her for it. Yeah, she was responsible for causing us headaches, but make no mistakes though, we loved her and her problems. Things got sour when she was abused at an early age by a close relative who was arrested, but the experience left her suffering from mental health issues. Our Brittany, who was full of life and light, gradually became someone nobody wanted to stay around. She did odd things and saw nothing wrong in them. Of course, we tried our best to help her out. We understood that her mental breakdown came as a result of the abuse, and so we patiently tried getting her all the help that we could afford. But even though we got her a therapist, the situation just worsened all the more. She began seeing things in people that no one saw, and we now found her talking to herself more frequently. We finally decided that she needed help when she turned 18, and became violent and destructive. Her friends began withdrawing from her, and of course, you don't blame them. Who would want to be friends with someone who was unstable? We had to pull her out of school in order to keep her from the public eye to avoid further embarrassment. It really hurt me to know that I was tagged the sister of that mad girl. It seemed as though the more she grew in age and size, the more she lost her sanity. She attacked our mother with a knife during that time, and my mother was lucky enough to escape with just a permanent scar on her face, and that was because our father had intervened on time. We had to come to terms with the reality that our sister had gone mad, and living with her in that condition was putting our lives at risk. She had attacked our mom in broad daylight while we were all awake, but who knew what she would do when we were all asleep and she began hearing voices. We arranged for her to be sent to a psychiatric home. She spent a year at the psychiatric home without any form of external visitation, but she came out all right after the year was done. To be honest, though, it took a while before I was able to get comfortable with her, and even lose my guard when I was around her. Just like everyone else, I had to be sure that her ailment had gone for good, and that there were not going to be any future episodes. It has been 16 years since she came out of there, and we have not for once witnessed an episode. Her life has returned to normal and she is doing really well. She actually has someone who she is currently dating, and from the looks of things, I strongly believe that they would end up getting married as they are already engaged, and the guy loves her to bits. Things were going well not just for my sister, but for the family in general. Our business was doing well, and aside from the fact that my sister and I were not yet married, we were content until 2 years ago when our mother was involved in an accident that inflicted a severe head injury. She was treated and she seemed okay until a few months later when she began developing signs of dementia. From memory loss down to impaired judgment and an altered personality, our mother was worse than my sister was. There would be times when she just stared you in the face as though you were not there. She found it hard to recognize anybody, especially my twin sister Brittany, who she seemed disgusted with the most. She called her the devil's child and would rain abuse on her. We had to overlook her as we knew that she was mentally unstable. We took her to see several doctors, and they all had the same diagnosis. After a series of tests and scans, they confirmed our suspicion. Our mother was suffering from dementia, and the painful part was that, unlike Brittany, my mother's own case was untreatable. It could only be managed for life. This was the second time that we would be dealing with the case of insanity in our family, and it made one wonder if this insanity of a thing ran in the family. I and my sister were 33 years at the time, and our parents were quite advanced in age, so my dad decided to split the family property between us and go reside with his wife in the countryside where they would live the rest of their days together. He left the house for my sister and me, and we were both in charge of the family business even though he remained the chairman of his company. But no sooner had my parents relocated to the countryside, did my sister begin suggesting that we sold the house which our parents had just given us. It felt absurd. To start with, this was our inheritance which we had just gotten less than a month ago, and selling it straight off would send the message that we did not cherish it value that was given to us. Furthermore, we were both single, and we could reside there. What wisdom was there in selling the house only to go out and pay for rent somewhere else? The whole idea of selling the house was just pointless, but I was really surprised as my sister kept on mounting pressure that it should be sold. I resisted every pressure coming from her to sell it. The more pressure she mounted, the more firm my resolve was in keeping the house. After a while, she let the whole matter be. I thought she had finally seen reason with me, but I never knew that she was trying to sell the house behind my back. She would use the periods when I was out at work monitoring the workers to bring in interested buyers to come and survey our house. I bumped into them one hot afternoon, when I returned to rest as I was not feeling too well. I could have created a scene there, but I was not strong enough to do so, so I just overlooked them. I traveled down to the countryside to meet with my father and inform him of my sister's doings. My mom recognized me and called me by name, but while I began telling my dad of my sister's doings, Mom began calling her names. Dad and I both ignored her as she was not in her right senses, but Dad was not happy with my sister as expected. He sent for my sister, who refused to come down, as she knew that the reason for the summon was because I had informed them of what she was up to. I stayed in the countryside for 3 days, while we waited for my sister to show up, which she never did. My father's plan was to talk some sense into her and make peace between us, but when on the 3rd day my sister still did not show up, my father called me aside and told me that I had the upper hand in how the affairs of the family were run. I did not initially understand what he meant by having the upper hand, and that was when he revealed to me that the lady I had been calling my twin sister all along was not even related to me by blood. She was adopted. A few weeks after my mother had given birth, my sister was found dumped on our farm by one of our workers, and rather than let the child be taken to a foster home where she would be ill-treated, my parents decided to take her as their child while following due process. The revelation was a shocking one. How come I never knew up till then? I drove back to meet Brittany. I still loved and saw her as my sister, but she needed to know that the people whom she was dishonoring were the only reason she turned out all right in life. Life may have been difficult for her if our parents did not pick her up. The least she could do was show gratitude. I got to the house to find her with her boyfriend George, but I didn't mind his presence. I broke the news to her and told her to put her acts together, but she did not seem surprised. She had discovered years back while snooping around our parents' room that she was adopted, and she reconnected with her biological parents who were responsible for her actions behind the scenes. The irresponsible parents who had given her up to die now wanted to get rich through her. Brittany threw shades at my parents, and when her boyfriend, who clearly didn't support her actions, tried intervening, she lashed out at him too. Brittany dragged my parents to court. She claimed that my parents hid her true identity from her, and that she was deceived all her life. She demanded that the court awarded her the house. It was just too unfair to us. How could she even stoop so low to bite the finger that fed her? I tried reasoning with her to withdraw the lawsuit filed against my parents and seek their forgiveness, but Brittany was stubborn and unyielding as always. She said she was ready to engage in a messy legal battle with my father except he let go of the house. My father willingly let go of the house for her. He did not want to have his name soiled all over the place because of the house. Brittany got the house, but my father fired her from the company. She did not actually care. George tried his best to stop Brittany from going too far, to a point where it was impossible for her to right her wrongs, but she would not budge. When it became clear that George was not going to endorse her behavior toward us, she told him to stay away from her. She cut ties with those who truly cared for her, my parents, her boyfriend, and me. My father noted that she was dead to us. I thought that was a bit harsh because although she had messed up, I still loved her and wouldn't throw away the years and things that we shared together because of what she had done. I believed that she was still redeemable. She sold the house immediately after she got ownership of it. I had to move out to go rent a little apartment in the city while my parents remained in the countryside. The money gotten from the sale of the house was enough to keep her and her biological parents afloat for a while. They moved in with her to an apartment that she had rented. She gave them a large chunk of the money while she equally carted for their needs. Within a short while, the money that she had left on her was exhausted, and that was when her parents absconded with the cash that they were able to milk out of her. It dawned on her that the fact someone gave birth to you does not really make that person your parent. She was broken and heartbroken with nobody to run to for help. The shame of how she had acted toward us stopped her from coming back. The whole incident triggered a relapse, and she found herself in the hospital for some days. I learned about her situation from George, who got wind of it when he visited her apartment, only to be told by co-tenants that Brittany had been admitted to the hospital for like a month. Out of the guys my sister had dated, George was the best. Even though she had pushed him off, he clearly did not stay away. This is someone who understands that being in a relationship is about being there for your partner no matter what. I do hope that I'll find a guy who will want the best for me even when I don't want it. George and I visited Brittany at the hospital, and she was full of shame that she could not look us in the face. I did not need her to say anything. I just gave her a warm embrace and she broke down weeping profusely. Her parents had used and dumped her just like they dumped her when she was a child. I did not let her say a word. We just remained locked in an embrace while I consoled her. She got discharged from the hospital and I had her move in with me. Even though we were not related by blood, she was my sister nonetheless. George and I helped her walk through the recovery process. I knew that there was still a very important issue we needed to deal with: my father. My mother's case had grown worse, and it emotionally drained my father. Bringing up my sister's issue was something I was sure he would not welcome, but it was something that needed to be done. The family was a priority. Brittany, George, and I went to visit my parents. My father, as expected, reacted against her presence in his home, and he was angry at me for bringing her there. My mother began the whole devil's child curse, and she even lashed out at me for partnering with the devil and bringing her to her home. We had to leave my parents' place before the matter escalated. I knew that I had seriously upset my father, but you can't really blame me for trying to bring my family together. My father called me a few days after the incident to inquire about my relationship with Brittany. He knew for sure that she was broke, but he wanted to know if I was the one sustaining her, which of course I was. Well, George equally assisted us financially too. My father demanded that I separate myself from Brittany and quit assisting her in any way, otherwise I could kiss him, Mom, and my inheritance goodbye. I knew that he was probably speaking from a place of hurt, and did not actually intend to carry out his threat to disown me, but I had to act with wisdom. If I lost everything, then how could I help Brittany? George and I arranged that Brittany to move out of my house and moved in with him, but I would secretly send him money for her upkeep on a monthly basis. This was supposed to be a temporal arrangement until when my father decided to forgive Brittany for her treachery. It's been 2 years since then, and things remain the same way between my father and Brittany, who now works as a storekeeper in a clothes production company. Things have, however, changed in other ways, as Brittany is currently engaged to George, and I do hope they get married. My mother had passed on about a year ago, and though Brittany wanted to come to her mother's funeral, she could not do so for obvious reasons. My father still resides in the countryside while I run the family business. I sometimes wonder what our family would have been like if Brittany was my actual twin sister who never betrayed the trust my father had in her. I still have my hopes up that we could become that one big and happy family that we used to be, that we ought to be. Now, here is the end of our first story, and I hope you guys enjoyed this karma OP's sister got. So before moving to the next story, you guys can share your thought in the comments section about this story, and do you support OP for helping her sister even after she betrayed her father? Also hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned with us for more satisfying revenge stories. Now, moving to our second story, which is a short but still satisfying story, about how Opus took revenge on her co-workers after they made fun of her and humiliated her. Now story. I was 18 years old, had been kicked out of my mom's, and was living with my cheating boyfriend. Didn't know at the time while working 3 jobs to make ends meet. I had just started at this sushi chain in our small city when one of the chefs offered to make me a roll. Even if it was comped, it still had to be entered into the POS system. I didn't know how, and asked him to help. As he walked around me, he made a point of slowly, aggressively, rubbing himself against my ass and entire backside in front of the kitchen crew who were all watching. I left the room to gather my composure. I felt so violated and embarrassed. After deciding to walk out, I went back in to grab my things from the cubby. I entered the room to find that every single one of them was eyeing me and laughing at me. It was cruel and humiliating. On the way home, I got pulled over for driving a bit erratically, and got a $900 ticket I absolutely couldn't afford. I was so absolutely infuriated with the chef and everyone there who laughed at me and delighted in schadenfreude at my assault. I guess now it's worth mentioning that they were all immigrants. I'm not necessarily proud of it, but in my anger, I sent an anonymous tip to ICE. A few months later, I saw their Yelp reviews had tanked and all the recent ones were complaining that the entire kitchen had closed. Their kitchen crew was all gone. The waitresses were huddled behind the counter talking about lawyers, and they didn't serve any hot food anymore. And eventually, they shut down. An old coworker confirmed my suspicions were true as well. I'm not racist at all. I wanted revenge and took the cheapest route, I'll admit, but in my heart, I still believed every one of them deserved it. The ticket was for speeding in a school zone. It wasn't a school, but rather a historic, public park with an X-wing light that fell into that category for traffic citations. Failure to yield to pedestrians. They had barely reached the sidewalk and I didn't slow down. Yes, I was wrong, driving without proof of registration and insurance. I had both, but had misplaced the registration and didn't know the login info to the insurance app. This all got thrown out in court for a forgiveness law program they had for young drivers. The manager to who I reported this after I left got charged by the restaurant for embezzling $10,000 and was fired after this. The owner tried not paying me for weeks until I threatened him with lawyers. Then a guy showed up and paid me in cash instead. Now, here is the end of our second story. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know if you had any bad experience with your boss or managers, or you can also share your opinion about the story in the comments section. So before leaving, please hit the like button and do subscribe to the channel to stay tuned with us for more awesome stories.